You're watching Capital Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
Welcome back. Now, on the very last days of September, there was a catastrophe in Teutopolis, Illinois. A truck carrying a bunch of anhydrous ammonia crashed on Route 40 just outside of the city, and it resulted in a cloud of the poisonous substance sitting over part of Teutopolis. 5 people were killed, and over half of the town had to be evacuated. Now, this truck was on Route 40 because of an accident that happened in the construction zone on Interstate 70, which runs straight through Effingham. And it's one of many accidents that's been happening in that construction corridor all summer. It's led lawmakers to have plenty of questions about what exactly is going on that stretch of the interstate and why these accidents keep happening. Joining us now is one of the lawmakers who has those questions. It's Senator Chapin Rose. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Cole.
So we talked in the aftermath of this accident. We've talked in the past about this specific corridor, and what did this whole incident do to validate those concerns, or was this about, proving that there was something, or this was the catastrophe, this was the cap to the entire problem that's been facing that town and that area all summer? What did this accident, how did this orient everything for you?
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't think we can understate how big of a tragedy this was. I mean, horrific loss of life, and what is absolutely, and there's almost no words to describe the loss of life involved in this. But this wasn't the first fatal accident this year on I-70. Earlier this summer, back in June, there was another fatality on the other side of this corridor. And just for your viewers, we're talking about an area that basically goes from Effingham to Terre Haute, Indiana. You're talking about 30 plus miles that was under construction. And what's worse is IDOT not only put the interstate I-70 under construction, but for most of the summer, they also placed the state route that parallels it, Route 40, under construction at the same time. Complete chaos. There have been dozens upon dozens of crashes, as you've discussed already. The 2 fatalities, which is just horrific, or there are multiple fatalities, but 2 fatal accidents. And then again, just here in the last night, as we taped this, there were 2 more people hospitalized after an accident. Okay, this is in what the locals have been saying from day one. Is this was so poorly planned, and to put 40 and 70 under construction at the same time was just asking for trouble. And again, and I realize that the most recent fatalities, 40 was already done, but again, you're talking about a dire situation down there. Every sheriff, every county highway engineer has been talking, pleading. We had an emergency meeting back in June after the first fatality, and it's just, look, people realize that accidents happen. When you have designed a system so poorly to prevent accidents from happening, it's just mind-blowing. And even as recently as the date of this most recent 5 fatalities of the anhydrous ammonia, the next morning, me told the regional IDOT engineer about the deaths in his district. Okay, I found out about them from Channel 3, from Jacob Dickey, in fact. That was 12, 13 hours after the initial incident had happened, and no one had told the regional engineer this had even happened in his area. But what kind of a response is going on in the meantime if the person in charge doesn't even know there was a problem to try to be handled, right? I mean, an entire town was evacuated, and nobody told anybody that this was going on. ISP, which, by the way, if we want to say thank you to anybody, our local first responders, local fire department, local ESDA, local sheriffs, local ambulances, and the Illinois State Police all handle themselves you know, uh, I mean, just did a phenomenal job under terrible circumstances. But, ISP had already had a press conference that morning before the engineer for the whole region even knew there was a problem. An entire town had been evacuated. How does that happen? And then, we demand another meeting. This time, from the governor's office, like, we need to have this meeting. You guys need to know what's going on, because we've been dealing with this all summer. They take 12 days to set up the meeting. 12 days after these 5 fatalities, we finally get, and by the way, that first day, so, well, I-70, the first accident on I-70 that Friday night had nothing to do with the fatality accident, the anhydrous tank that led to the fatalities on I-40 later that night, an hour later. They're absolutely related, because when I-70 backs up, it backs up on these little tiny roads that have nowhere to go. And you've got nowhere to go, you're asking for trouble. So I'm incredibly sad for these families. I'm beyond frustrated with IDOT. And it's, I think we're finally getting some level of action, but my goodness, it's just too late.
When you have these conversations, you've had this meeting, and I wonder what are the questions being asked there? Is it, how did you think this was a good idea for this particular plan? Is it just trying to understand the process for how IDOT plans out these construction projects? Or, and on top of that, was there a sense of not full responsibility? There were a long list of events that had to take place, a long list of chances and crazy happenstance that had to happen for this particular truck to crash and then leak. But I wonder, is there a sense of responsibility when going forward with this? For this
well, again, the first thing they said was the first accident, nothing to do with the second accident. And I won't believe that, because all summer long, we've been dealing with backed up traffic that once the accident occurs on 70, it's got nowhere to go. Okay. And the planned detours aren't working. So that's, that is for, but look, the first question is asked is the simple question: when is this construction over? And what are we going to do in the meantime to make sure people slow down? Right. So, Director Kelly from the Illinois State Police, I want to commend him personally. He alone from the administration was the guy who took the call last week and began putting things in place immediately to provide additional state police patrols on I-70, to bring in additional resources. They're doing commercial truck enforcement. They're doing all kinds of stuff. In fact, I was even told today that they've got a trooper standing on top of a dump truck, actually with binoculars, watching commercial trucks come through on their phones, watching movies, doing all kinds of things that aren't safe. And then they're calling it into other troopers, who then subsequently pull that commercial truck over and issue the appropriate citations. Okay. So I want to give the state police a big, they have been taking this seriously. What was disappointing. So the first question is, what are we going to do to make this safe for the remainder of this season, this construction season? I will point out, it took IDOT 12 days after the fatalities to get on the phone with us, get on the Zoom call with us yesterday. And they still had things. Well, we're thinking about rumble strips. Well, we might call the Midwest truckers. Well, we might do some more. I mean, what do you mean might? What do you got? Maybe. I mean, you had 12 days. Frankly, you've had the whole summer. But look, the good news is the construction for this year is wrapping up. At least one of the lanes is now open completely. They're hoping to get the other one open shortly. But the second question then, Cole, becomes, what do you do next year? Because I-70 is going to go back under construction next year. So we do have a commitment to put together a working group of local leaders. And by that, I mean, not politicians. I mean, our local county highway engineers, our local sheriffs, the ISP folks, IDOT folks, to try to do what should have happened this year, which is plan something that makes sense. Because what happened this year didn't make any sense from the get-go. And, again, the other piece of this, and Cole, you can You heard it here first on Channel 3. But I'm going to be filing, along with Representative Emerg, legislation shortly to require all of these GPS navigation systems, whether it's Google Earth, Google Maps, or whatever you use it, an Apple, etc., to have a direct human contact point for IDOT to give them preferred detours, to just upload when we know something's going to be detoured, but also, frankly, a 24/7, 365 emergency contact. So if we know that we need to route somebody off of 40 and on to 57, you can talk to somebody. Because one of the things we know from this summer is these navigation systems were not routing traffic onto the safest detour routes. They're putting them onto township roads, they're putting them onto county roads, they're putting them into communities and making things worse. And so there's a whole nother element to this beyond just, IDOT and what was terrible planning on the front end. The other element to this is, once you have that accident, people's GPS navigation systems, and imagine you're a truck driver from, Maine on their way to Oklahoma, right? And you're on I-70. You don't know where the heck Arbuckle Road is taking you in rural Clark County, but your phone just told you to get on it. Well, wait a minute. You can't put an 80,000-pound truck on Arbuckle Road. So on top of all this human tragedy, there have been literally hundreds of thousands of dollars of damage to these local roads in, Clark, Cumberland, and Effingham counties from people being routed all over the place by their phone. So it's just been there's no other way to describe this other than just a damn mess. And the human loss of life is it's just so beyond tragic.
All right. Well, Senator Rose, thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to continue discussing these next steps with you going forward.
Thanks, Cole.
When we come back, we sit down with Jack Darren of the Illinois Sierra Club to talk about the latest movements with a new carbon dioxide pipeline that actually won't be coming to Illinois for the time being. We'll be right back.